Imagine waking up in a world where every tree, flower, and blade of grass no longer produces oxygen but carbon dioxide. At first, you might not notice anything strange. The trees still look green, the flowers still bloom, and crops still grow. But beneath this familiar surface, the very foundation of life on Earth would be collapsing. Right now, plants act as our planet's life support system. Through photosynthesis, they absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, maintaining the delicate balance that allows animals, including humans, to breathe. If plants flipped this system and began releasing carbon dioxide instead, that balance would shatter instantly. First, the atmosphere would rapidly become saturated with CO2. Humans and animals need oxygen to survive. Our cells rely on it to produce energy. With oxygen levels plummeting, breathing would feel like suffocating. Imagine running out of breath not because you're tired, but because there's simply no oxygen left around you. Within weeks to months, large animals, including humans, would begin to die out. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide would keep building up like an invisible poison. This wouldn't just suffocate us, it would supercharge the greenhouse effect. CO2 traps heat in the atmosphere, so Earth's temperature would skyrocket. Polar ice would melt at record speed, sea levels would surge, and extreme weather would become the new normal. The planet would resemble Venus more than Earth, a hot, stormy, and hostile environment. But it doesn't stop there. Oceans absorb much of our atmospheric carbon dioxide, and if plants were constantly pumping CO2 into the air, the seas would become dangerously acidic. Marine life, from coral reefs to tiny plankton, would collapse. Since plankton produce much of Earth's oxygen today, their destruction would further accelerate the suffocation of the planet. Interestingly, a few life forms might thrive. Certain bacteria and archaea don't need oxygen. They survive in places like volcanic vents or swamps, feeding on carbon dioxide and methane. In a CO2-heavy world, these microbes might become the new rulers of Earth. Perhaps, over millions of years, evolution could create new organisms adapted to this alien atmosphere. But for humans and most animals, there would be no chance. On land, ecosystems would collapse. Forests would no longer be lungs of the planet, but toxic CO2 factories. Animals dependent on oxygen, birds, insects, mammals, would vanish. Crops would fail, not just because of the lack of oxygen, but because rising heat and acidity would make survival impossible. Humanity's most basic needs, food, air, water, would disappear. This thought experiment reveals just how fragile our existence is. We take oxygen for granted because it's always been there, supplied endlessly by plants. But in reality, it's the result of billions of years of evolutionary history. Early Earth had little oxygen until photosynthetic organisms began releasing it around 2.5 billion years ago, transforming the planet into one where complex life could exist. If photosynthesis had gone differently, if plants had produced CO2 instead of oxygen, Earth might have remained barren, lifeless, and suffocating. So next time you see a tree or a field of grass, remember, they are not just scenery. They are oxygen factories, climate regulators, and the invisible partners of our survival. If they worked in reverse, Earth would not be the blue-green planet we know, but a suffocating wasteland. Subscribe for more interesting content.